Hi, everybody. I just wanted to talk to you about studying for the counseling exam because it's hard and I did it twice. I didn't pass the first time. I passed the second time with 12 extra points. I paid for a big fat study guide for the first time, didn't make it. I wanted to find a foolproof method that would help me pass the second time, and I did. I came up with my own set of notes. This fills about like 150 pages of my own notes. And I thought I would just share really briefly some hot tips that might help you pass the counseling exam. So here it goes. 5 tips that helped me pass the counseling exam that I think will help you too. Tip number 1, know some basic diagnoses. You don't have to memorize the DSM. All you really need to know is like the depressive disorders, the anxiety disorders, and a bunch of other common ones. So here I have like personality disorders. I have like a bunch of depressive disorders that are fairly common. I have over here, I have anxiety disorders and other disorders like PTSD, OCD, and things that really turn up a lot. So those are the ones that you're going to have to know. Know basically the C, the DD, and the T. C, criteria, the things that make the disorder the disorder. A disorder needs to have all these different criteria in order to actually be that disorder. If it doesn't have the criteria, you can't call it that. And there are lots of disorders that look like different disorders. That's the DD, the differential diagnosis. And the exam is going to try and trip you up. They're sneaky sneaks. So it's good to study the differential diagnoses because each of these differential diagnoses is basically saying, it looks like this, but except for this one thing, it's different. And the T, the time, they're going to ask you about like, what's the duration of the disorder? Because if it lasts for 2 weeks, it might be one thing. If it lasts for 6 months, it might be something else. They're going to ask you the age of onset. If it starts in childhood, it might be one thing. If it starts in adulthood, it might be something else. And they're going to ask you how far from like the triggering event it happened. If it was like, if the triggering event was like a few days ago, it might be one thing. And if it was like 6 months ago, it might be something else. So time is super important for a diagnosis. Tip number 2, therapeutic modalities. I made my own little list right over here, my therapeutic modalities. There are things like family systems therapy, different family therapies. It's just good to have a basic understanding of these different therapies. You'll have to know quite a bit about CBT, narrative therapy, solution-focused therapy. You'll have to know what makes psychodynamic therapy, and Gestalt therapy, logotherapy, and it's going to ask you about IPSRT. So you don't have to like be able to write a book about each of these, but think of them as if each one was like a category in Jeopardy. You should be able to maybe sweep that category, just answer like 5 questions from easy to hard about each of these things. Tip number 3, assessments. So these are the tests that you or a psychiatrist give to the client in order to see if they can be diagnosed with something. So know the basic ones for depression and anxiety, but there are also ones that you'll have to know about like vocational counseling or learning disabilities or personality. And within personality, you have things like progressive tests. That's Rorschach testing. So if you know what a Rorschach test is, you have a basic idea of what a progressive test is. So know the assessments. It's just a matter of memorizing some of these. They're pretty nifty to know, so you can tell your client that you have this option at your disposal when you actually meet with them. Tip number 4, that's not 4, 4, confidentiality. You're going to have at least a couple questions on confidentiality. And a good rule of thumb is you may not break confidentiality no matter who is paying for the session. It could be a parent, it could be a spouse, it could be an employer, it could be an organization. It doesn't matter. It ain't none of their business. The only times you must break confidentiality is when you have a court-ordered subpoena, if a client is younger than 14 years old, or if the client is an immediate threat to themselves or someone else. That's the only time. Finally, tip number 5, I find that studying for 20 minutes at a time is a good way to retain information. Any more, and you're just wasting your own time. If you really want to absorb it and not waste your own time, take a break after 20 minutes. And I have always been a weak standardized test taker, always. We're talking about going way back since I was a kid. And I was able to do this studying for like 3 months at 20 minutes at a time. Someone in my grad school taught me something really nifty. TTTTT. Teach Teddy till Teddy is taught, which means if you can teach the material to your teddy bear, then you know it. If you're able to teach something, then you know it. So just reading something isn't really enough. If you can teach it to someone else, then you definitely know it. Seemed to work. And here's a bonus tip. You're definitely going to be getting a question about Erikson's 8 stages of development. So just study those 8 stages. They may be irrelevant for most of us, but they're going to ask you anyway. And that's it. That's 5 quick tips about passing the counseling exam. It took me 150 pages of notes, a daunting task, but that's just what I needed because I'm such a weak standardized test taker. Hopefully you have some skills that I don't have and it won't be as arduous for you, but I hope this was a good start to get you started. If you want more information about my notes, you might find a description down below. Take care. Good luck. Let's change the world together.